Next, we'd like to cover the grammar point that comes up during the Mandarin Blueprint Method course. It covers the tag that you'll find in Anki called GW, how does what, tone of voice, 副词语气. So 语气 means tone of voice. So it's not the tone as in like the 5 Mandarin tones. It's more the tone of voice, like trying to get across, well, like you would in English. His tone of voice, he had a bad tone of voice with me, or he had a hurried tone of voice, things like that. Now, of course, we've covered different types of adverb, which we call how does what, because it's the function of an adverb. An adverb takes the verb, or the does what's happening in the sentence, and it describes how that verb is happening. So we've covered tone of voice, this one covers tone of voice. We've covered degree. We've covered frequency. We've covered adverbs of denial, things like that. This one is about tone of voice. So does the speaker feel exasperated? Do they want to get to the bottom of a problem? Do they think that they have no choice in something? Let's explore these different types of adverbs of tone of voice. And as always, at the point in the course where you're seeing this video, it's not that you've learned all possible adverbs that convey a tone of voice, but it is enough that you'll be able to get the general concepts of how it works. So let's start with the sentence that comes from level 19 of the course. The sentence is, 你最好坐车. You'd better go by bus or train. So the adverb here is 最好. And so 最好 by itself means best. It means the best option. But if you say to somebody, 你最好坐车, then what you're trying to get across is there's advice. There's a tone of giving advice here. It's like, oh, you'd better take the train there, buddy. And it could be the bus or the train, because when you drive a car, that's 开车. But if you are sitting in a taxi, or you're sitting in a bus, or you're sitting on a train, it's 坐车. And of course, 坐 means to sit. So to sit a car, or to sit a vehicle, is essentially getting across the point that you're not driving it, so you're a passenger. And so, 你最好坐车 is something you might say to somebody when they're considering riding a bike, or they're considering whatever. Say they're considering riding a bike, but they don't have much time. You might say, 你最好坐车, because that way they'll know, okay, you better do this. And so, that's the tone of advice that you'll get from 最好. Now let's go to the next sentence. The sentence without the adverb is, 我想坐飞机. But if you add here, 我还是想坐飞机, then this will change the tone of the sentence to indicate that you still want to go by plane. So if you just compare that to the last sentence, somebody says, 你最好坐车, you would say, 我还是想坐飞机. That response is indicating a tone of, even though there's other options, I'm still going with this one. That's 还是. When you use 还是in that context, that's what you're trying to get across. You're trying to get across that tone that, despite the fact that, your suggestion that they'd better go by bus, the speaker is nonetheless sticking to their plan to go by plane. So that's a couple of examples of, saying you'd better but I still. Let's move to sentence 3. 天哪，你到底什么意思? 天哪，你到底什么意思? This is from level 18 that translates to, geez, what on earth do you mean? And the key word here is 到底. 到底 literally means arrive at the bottom. So if you want to get to the bottom of something, you'll skip the formalities and say 到底to indicate you want to cut through the riffraff. So that's the idea behind that. So in the above sentence, there are a couple of contexts where they might say 你到底什么意思? The first would be if they were potentially offended, right? So perhaps you said something uncouth about his or her mother, and they want to get to the bottom of what you mean. But alternatively, perhaps you were beating around the bush about what you want. So the person's kind of frustrated with your lack of clarity, and so the speaker wants you to cut the crap and say what you mean. 你到底什么意思? Very, very useful to use that adverb to get across the idea that you want to just get to the bottom of something and cut the crap. Next, sentences 4 and 5 are related to each other. So they both mean finally. So if you want to get across the idea of, oh, you finally showed up or something like that, then you'll use either 总算 or 终于. So let's look at these two sentences. 你们总算回来了. You all finally returned. Next sentence. 今天终于有空了. I finally have free time today. So both 总算 and 终于 mean finally. The characters 总 and 算 translate to total 总, or the computation. So and 算 is computation, so total computation. So you can imagine how that sort of makes sense. Now, 终 and 于 translate as final concerning. So you can use them interchangeably when you feel that something has finally happened. There's not too much of a difference between the two. The reason it indicates tone of voice is that the idea that something is finally taking place is all about the perception of the speaker. It's not necessarily something objective, but certainly you know that the speaker feels that way. That we've all had times in life where you might feel like something has finally happened, but from the other person's perspective, it got finished earlier than expected. So we've all run across that before. The idea is it's about perception. Next, we have sentence number 6, which is 我只好同意. So this sentence means I've no choice but to agree. I like this adverb 只好. And it's a fascinating word because it means to have no choice but. In other words, the only 只 way to have a good 好 outcome. So if you just said 我同意, there's no particular indication of why you agree, but 我只好同意 shows that the speaker doesn't necessarily want to agree, they just can't see an alternative. So this is another great adverb that expresses tone of voice. Now the final sentence I'd like to talk about is a really useful adverb that expresses tone of voice because, especially for a person who is learning Mandarin, and that adverb is 反正. So let's take a look at this sentence. 反正我不喜欢吃米饭. 反正我不喜欢吃米饭. Regardless, I don't like to eat rice. So why is this such a good word to know as a beginning learner? Well, it's because sometimes you're not exactly sure how to explain yourself, but you know the point of what you're trying to say. So let's imagine the context of the above sentence. Suppose that you're trying out the keto diet, the ketogenic diet, which requires less than 50 grams of carbs per day. I've done this many times in my life. I'm probably going to continue to do it now that I'm back from Thailand. I might have put on a few pounds while I was there because Thai food is really good. And I'm going to go into a ketogenic diet. And suppose I don't know how to explain the complexity of how to convey to a Chinese person in Chinese how this diet works and what are the dietary restrictions. And so you start to try to say it, but you realize I don't have the vocabulary for this yet. You decide it's not worth trying to continue, so you say, regardless, 反正 I don't like rice. 我不喜欢吃米饭. And that's just a way of getting across, all right, despite the fact that I wasn't able to really get this across, I can just make the main point emphasized by adding 反正 before the point. You know, in our journeys to fluency, both Luke and I found that 反正 comes in handy all the time, and we're sure it will for you as well. Sorry, one more sentence. Before, I think I said that was the last sentence. This is one more sentence, which is 正好. 正好 is a great word that indicates happens to, or, you know, just happens to be, right? So in this sentence, 我的想法正好相反. My opinion happens to be the opposite, or the opposite of the person you're talking to. You'll find that 正好 comes in handy when you want to create a tone of coincidence. That's the general idea of this. You could just say, I have the opposite opinion. But by adding 正好, the listener knows that you find the situation to be happenstance. You're somewhat surprised, it's coincidental, and so you're saying, hey, 我的想法正好相反. And so you'll see that one come up quite a bit. So that's your GW, how does what, tone of voice, 副词语气. 谢谢你观看我们的这个视频. If you found this video valuable and you'd like us to help you reach fluency and literacy in Mandarin Chinese as fast as possible without all the headache of traditional learning methods, just head to mandarinblueprint.com to learn more. Also, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell below to be notified every time we release a new video. And of course, 保重.